you hear me? Okay, cool. I'm trying to use my inside voice. Welcome. It is 3:03. We're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll start with our wow, goodness, this is long. Roll call vote. Roll call vote. Roll call.
Absolutely. Shannon Ortland.
Here.
Alberto Garibay.
Present.
Patrice Guillory.
Here.
Gilbert Salinas. Shayla Bonner.
Here.
Matthew Malone. We have 4 members present in person. Quorum is established. Meeting can continue.
Thank you. So again, welcome everybody to the Racial Justice Oversight Body Data Subcommittee. We have established quorum, and so we want to go ahead and get into our introductions, starting with the folks on Zoom. Let's see. Garyana, you want to go first?
Yeah, hello, my name is Garyana Youngblood, and I am with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
First?
Michelle. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Michelle Elizondo, Office of Reentry and Justice.
First.
Good afternoon. Chris James here with the W. Haywood Burns Institute.
Kendra.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kendra Carr with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice.
Peter.
Good afternoon. Peter Kim, also with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice.
Ashley.
Hey everybody, I'm Ashley Goddard. I am a district representative for Supervisor Burgess here in District 3.
And Liana.
Hi, I'm Liana Willis, and I'm also with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Thanks everyone for the introduction. Again, welcome. Next, we'll move to any announcements. Are there any announcements at this time? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move to public comments. Public comment on any item under this jurisdiction of the Racial Justice Oversight Body and not on this agenda. We'll open it up for public comment. Also hearing and seeing none. All right, so we'll move along to our approval of the record of action from October 26, 2023, Data Subcommittee meeting. Folks want to take time to look at that real quick. To approve.
I will move the record of action.
Can I get a second?
Second.
And can we get a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Shannon.
Yes.
Garibay.
Yes.
Patrice.
Yes.
Shayla.
Yes.
4 yeses, motion carries.
Thank you. Next is agenda item number 4, which is to define the roles of the Racial Justice Oversight Body Data Subcommittee. So I'm guessing that's attachment number 4.
To the, oh no, there's no attachment with this one.
Oh, okay.
So this is just general discussion.
Oh,
I think if I recall in our last meeting, which eons ago.
Was it really October?
I think.
Yeah.
Wow. Happy New Year, everyone.
I think in our last meeting, though, we were sort of kind of still deliberating on some of the objectives that this committee was charged with in terms of, receiving data reports from different agencies and how that's kind of been put on hold at this point. Due to the heavy lift of that and what would be required to get a full picture or view of where we stand in terms of racial disparities across the criminal justice continuum. But with that said, though, I think we talked about still the possibility of continuing moving forward as a data subcommittee and looking at, well, what other ways can we or what other avenues can this committee work in with respect to criminal justice data or data related to racial disparities. I think that's kind of where we're at. And I know the next item would be for us to look at our previous work plan to decide on how we potentially move forward given the progress to date. But so in some ways, 4 and 5 agenda items can kind of work in tandem.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense because I think we were talking about, I know we had the website that we were posting information on, and then we were trying to also see how who's going to start kind of spearheading that or who's going to take that over. And I think now that we have ORESJ, but yeah, I guess we can start just with open discussion around the roles of the data subcommittee. And so I will open it up for and then if there's any public comment, open that up as well before going into the actual roles and objectives.
Can I ask you, we'll start with a question and then kind of go from there. So we're not continuing to get the data that we have been, or was I misunderstanding the comment that we're not collecting data as much anymore, or it's been a heavy lift for the folks who are providing it?
Yeah, well, more or less a heavy lift in terms of how do you patch together all of these different agency data, knowing that some of it is missing. So for example, probation was providing data that was being analyzed. Sheriff's office at the time, it was just raw information, but we're getting information now even through their oversight report. So and that's being done at the board of supervisors level. But then we had Office of Ed was providing information on suspensions and expulsions, IEPs as well. And then that was kind of it. I don't know if I'm missing any other agency, but then we also talked about reaching out to local police departments, getting information from them. There was a previous presentation done to the Police Chiefs Association and to the Mayor's Conference and all of that. Even a request was made to the District Attorney's Office to get some data and information from them. They at the time also stated that they didn't really have the capacity. So it's, kind of left us at the place where getting the information that is coming forward is only giving you partial view. And so the steps to move forward to get the full view require a lot of intensive work and resources, because you have to broker those relationships with those agencies that aren't necessarily responsive to this particular body or to the county at all. They're talking about municipal agencies with police departments. But then even from there, what are we doing with the information once we receive it?
And that was my next sort of follow-up question. I appreciate appreciating that the data is different from everywhere, right? And then it's sort of what do we want to do with that data going forward? And I don't know if it's merely just trying to call it together in a way that the public can kind of understand it, and that's the website I think we were mentioning, or because I remember from some of the, I don't know if it was in the larger group meetings or other meetings of this subcommittee, but that was, I sensed some of the members, okay, so what's the next step with it? And I don't think you can, it's a lot of work because you can't stop the intake, right? Because then you're on pause and you're out of date. But I'm trying to kind of think about what the best use of that you know, is it this committee and the overall committee that, you know, the overall our job going to put some analysis to it? I mean, is that what we want to do? I just don't know. And of course, I don't, you know, I'm sort of standing a little bit distant from it, but it's just a matter of, I think, you know, let me give the one example, is that putting the data out there is helpful, but needs context. So, you know, how do we divide that workload up, or is that what this subcommittee and the group as a whole wants to do? And then maybe one other thing we could do is identify as best we can the precise data points that we've found to be most helpful, the manner in which it's being collected, as a roadmap for future data collection.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I've experienced, you know, just dealing with this on the court side is that, you know, I can't undo bad prior data, you know, but we can look, you know, we don't do it. It's different for racial data. Is not something the court collects, but I'm thinking of other data points. You know, we can be better attuned to it from going forward. If we have a plan about what people want. And of course, in our case, it would be direction from judicial counsel or whomever, but you're talking about brokering relationships. That would be how it would be built, I think, here.
Right.
And that way we can, you know, we can continue to have data, but also maybe get it in a better format for what the committee and the R job overall wants to do with it. All right, I'm done. I'm sorry, that was long.
No, that was very helpful.
Intended to talk.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Because I think one thing about it is like, if we're collecting the data, but what's the story behind it? I think somebody made a point that's like, oh, the arrest is high for African American in a certain community, but if that certain community is predominantly African American, okay, like what's the story? And it is, I mean, it is a heavy lift. And I think Denise was doing a lot of that work back then in pulling all the different reports together and then trying to consolidate everything and make it make sense. It's definitely a heavy lift. Any other thoughts or comments regarding to that?
I can just add that through in education, when we work with districts and charter schools I mean, as you can imagine, we collect a lot of data, outcome data. And what we try to do is put protocols in place and processes in place for groups of leaders or teachers to look at the data to make some type of decision to improve their practice. So it kind of sounds like if we're looking at this data that we either try to find root cause analysis or apply some type of strategy or protocol to look at the data. We use equity protocols at schools. We use all types of protocols, but I think that, and I heard this earlier, is just what is the outcome of what do we want to do with the data?
Thank you. So definitely the point, right, of collecting that information is to use it, much like what Shannon said, right, that some analysis is required to figure out sort of what, you know, if any trends or patterns, you know, are present, and how those might inform recommendations that this group might be able to make in terms of practice or policy changes that may impact those trends and those patterns. But the analysis has to be done. We have had some issue, I think, with finding there are certain agencies that have, you know, requested explicitly to have the data analyzed by entities that are, you know, housed within the county. Otherwise, the Burns Institute definitely has the capacity for some data analysis, but we are not housed within the county. We're actually not physically housed anywhere at this point, as many of you know. But I think it's important to have this conversation and all of the context that, you know, everyone who has spoken up to this point has offered, because we have, co-directors of the ORESJ here. And I think, to the extent that data collection and or analysis is a part of, their charge, or is a part of, the many things that they will be offering or looking to install within their offices, and for the sake of moving these sorts of endeavors forward within the county. And as they're, continuing to sort of, take shape in terms of what even that looks like, I think just hearing, the sort of roadblocks that we have faced in trying to get that information is going to be important. I think the level of relationships and or authority, right, that an entity like that would have to be able to request that sort of information and get it, as well as whatever sort of resources or capacity may exist for software systems that can produce, decent reports and decent analysis, because that's also something we've heard a lot. This particular law enforcement office or whatever doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the infrastructure, the system, the so on and so forth to produce what you're asking for. Those are all things that we certainly need some help with. It's tough for this group to be able to address those issues directly, but certainly is important to raise them here, so that those who can may, hopefully at some point in the future.
Yes, I just want to, chime in here and thank everyone for these comments, and just really let you all know how excited Peter and I are to jump in. I also just want to say we are doing our homework as fast as we can. We're trying to get, come up to speed as fast as we can. And so right now we're taking lots of notes, listening in, but we do recognize that, our role in the county, as like countywide, reporting directly to the Board of Supervisors, everything you all know. We do want to leverage that role, and in terms of the work of the full body, the full racial justice oversight body, and also the data subcommittee. I think one of the, just related to what Chris, you were just sharing, we're working really quickly to develop our data infrastructure so that we can be ready to collect data, analyze it. We're, again, we're in that office setup stage, but we just want you all to know that we're like listening, we're taking notes when we make the transition to facilitate our job. We're, ready to move on the decisions. I hope this doesn't sound like, so all I'm trying to say is we're trying to come up to speed as quickly as possible, and we're ready to, leverage our role in the county, and take action on some of the places where there's been gaps in the reporting that you all have talked about, especially in then making those policy and practice changes. But thank you for just the time to we're trying to get going.
No, and we totally understand that. And just a teaser to everyone, Kendra and Peter, they will be presenting at the full body meeting next week. So that way we have more of a context of some of the things that they're working on. They've been presenting in different spaces throughout the county about their work. So it'd be great for us to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, if I could chime in as well. Just to piggyback on what you just said, Patrice, I wanted to let you know that we will have a more kind of formal introduction to the group, to the entire our job body next week at your Thursday meeting. We'll be able to share a little bit about what some of our priorities are for the coming year. And one of those does include what Kendra alluded to, right, about how do we build up our own ability and capacity to collect data countywide. And so I think this conversation it dovetails with that, but, as you all just kind of shared and spoke about as everywhere, right? Data is not always easy to collect, particularly with large systems. So I think a lot of our jobs is going to be trying to learn from you all. What are some of those challenges and roadblocks, Chris, that you alluded to? What are those? I'm sure you guys have already explored a lot of different ways to get on the same page when it comes to data. I mean, I already have we have some questions already, like, there's the California Policy Lab. Is that a place where we can try to collect and archive and then organize some of the data? It sounds like, you might have had other conversations, right? In terms of folks like Burns Institute. So we just need to get caught up because you guys have been doing this for a long time. So I think that's going to be probably our first step to figure out what's happened. What have you guys tried? What have you explored? And then where can we kind of move from there?
One other thing that I kind of just jotted down too is how does the data that we collect supportive of the work of the other subcommittees? So I know diversion is a really big group. So what is it that they need from us as far as like the data points? And then what is it that C?
Yeah, community engagement and funding.
Right. So what is it that they need from us? Is it that community don't understand, like when we did have the things posted, is it too hard for people to understand? Is it too hard to read? Are we just throwing numbers at them? And so those are some things that we should probably think about too, when we're thinking about how everything rolls out.
And just kind of connected to that point, I think it'd be worth it for this committee to consider the ways in which we utilize the information to help inform, or maybe as part of the information gathering, what then is out there in terms of best practices or to address whatever issues are coming up for us. So some time ago, we did have Center for Policing Equity that presented and discussed, different projects that they were working on in different parts of the country, different jurisdictions where they were doing sort of this public safety redesign to address certain areas in that respective jurisdiction that seemed to be a notable intervention for reducing crime or violence or, all of that, and metrics and the indicators that they utilize to help measure the success of that. Unfortunately, during the presentation, we didn't get a whole lot of outcome information from some of those projects. And I think some of them were probably newly launched, but it might be worth revisiting that as well. Only just as a way for us to see, again, what's sort of what's been researched out there as potential solutions or remedies for any issues that we're finding. So I can imagine, for example, with the diversion committee developing their diversion criteria for youth, let's just say, well, then what are the top charges or top offenses that this could potentially help address? And so even if you're creating a diversion pathway by identifying those specific offenses, what then are also the ancillary supports to help reduce that being an ongoing occurrence for those specific communities? So just a couple of pieces that we can tie in that, yes, we want to collect data. Yes, we want to look at it. Yes, we want to analyze it, but then the other research element to it are what are the potential remedies out there that can help us address any of those issues.
Any other public comments or thoughts around the role of the subcommittee? We can move to agenda item number 5, which is to discuss and prioritize goals and objectives for 2024. So this is attachment number 2, pages 7 and 8, and this is from previous year, right? Or no, this is 2022.
Well, I think the previous year kept the 2022 year.
Yeah,
It just
kind of rolled over.
rolling over.
Okay. So yeah, I will say, like, I'll just read the goal for what's on here. It says to improve racial and ethnic equity in the justice systems by developing standard practices for data collection and reporting and improving capacity for county agencies and programs, including those administered by CBOs to report accurate individual level data disaggregated, by race and ethnicity. And so we have 3 objectives with some activities and deliverables on there. And then as you can see, we have some progress as of 2022. Then we can go through these and just kind of discuss and prioritize those as we see fit. Starting with objective number 1. Which is to support the collection and reporting of accurate data in all criminal justice and law enforcement agencies. The activities there is to provide links to publicly available data at the national, state, and local levels, surrounding social justice related factors within the population. These links would include demographic data as well as criminal justice, law enforcement, education, and other data sources that are relevant to racial disparities. Activity 2 is to identify and disseminate a prioritized list of additional countywide and or agency specific data that will support meeting the objectives of the RJOB and Racial Justice Task Force. And there are some additional things there. I will read the deliverable, which is to maintain an up-to-date website or webpage that with information about the links to publicly available data related to the demographic, criminal justice, law enforcement, and education patterns present within the jurisdiction of interest, which is local, state, and national. These would be sources of data where data could be viewed by race and ethnicity. So that is still an ongoing thing, which kind of was put on pause last year due to the heavy lift. But any thoughts around that one?
Question, if I can, on this is an additional resource, number 6 and 7, which talk about best practices on accuracy of data and collection of data. You know, this has the data subcommittee providing that consultation and developing countywide training. I'm curious, you know, what kind of expertise we would need from whom if we were going to do that, and sort of break those out in kind of a consultation with someone who has some professional data analysis background, and maybe someone here does that I'm not aware of. I don't know, but who would our resource be for those kinds of things where we need to identify best practices? This goes back to my comment about how we collect data going forward.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it's literally 6 and 7. It's the last year, but it was the one that stood out to me when I was looking.
I want to say Burns did a presentation on this before, right, Chris? Yes,
we did, and we can update that. I think and definitely, like, that was what my hand was up for. You know, before the question even got asked. I think that's a great you know, that's a great way to define a role for this subcommittee when currently, you know, there's not a lot of data coming in. Is at least to begin to define sort of, you know, what you're looking for, how it is, you know, best collected, best shared, and sort of best disseminated, and then, you know, potentially in the long term, as you're working with ORESJ, who probably takes on a lot of, you know, this actual you know, these nuts and bolts of sort of receiving that data from folks when they're ready to do that. We're not gonna rush them. you know, you can work with them to say, this is what we're looking for. Like, this is maybe what these requests should be sure to entail, so on and so forth. And, you know, in addition to that, also to offer, you know, any sorts of coach ups or training sessions or presentations to various agencies throughout the county about what you're looking for and why. You know, best practices about how we identify people by race and ethnicity. Are we asking them what they identify as versus eyeballing it? Some of that stuff seems basic, but it varies from agency to agency, sort of what the policy is. And so just making sure that, you know, there's a standard across the board in terms of what the best practices are.
Any other comments? So objective 2, in an effort to create greater transparency and accountability of county criminal justice and law enforcement agencies, data shall be published related to the demographic, criminal justice, law enforcement, and education patterns present within the county by race and ethnicity. Activities there is to develop an online format or dashboard to be easily accessed by the public agencies, and nonprofit organizations. One of the deliverables is as resources in public agency and law enforcement participation allows, develop local web-based data dashboard for public access. Data should be presented by race and ethnicity, easily accessible to the public, and updated annually. So again, and I can see why this was carried out since 2022, because we literally took a pause, like, hey, got a lot. So I think, again, this is just another ongoing thing, and a greater discussion to be had of how things are going to roll out. I think we had a question about which website we will be using and all that stuff. So objective 3 is to analyze outcomes of interventions implemented to measure impact on racial disparities. All activities under this objective to be reported to the RJOB and any other bodies, collectives identified by the Board of Supervisors. Activities there is to conduct annual review of criminal justice law enforcement outcomes to assess the presence of racial disparities. Make recommendations to improve programs and practices for elimination, reduction of any racial disparities. And that's what we were literally just talking about. How do we use that data, and how do we put it in a way that it supports our recommendations? So required deliverable is as resources become available, develop annual reports surrounding criminal justice, law enforcement, and educational outcomes by race and ethnicity. Giving data availability, these reports should also access programmatic outcomes and interventions by race, ethnicity, and provide recommendations to improve programs and practices. Any questions or thoughts with those 2 objectives?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot there. It is definitely a lot. Yeah.
And then we also have the new program too, right?
Yeah. So we have, I mean, that was in direct response to the data that was being collected, where we then sought out federal funding to have the strategies for youth training. And that in and of itself is a pretty large lift. And what I mean in terms of large lift is recruiting police agencies to participate. It's going to be a training program that rolls out over the course of 3 years. It just dawned on me, I can't remember the last time if we did a presentation in this subcommittee about the rollout.
It was sometime last year.
Yeah, it was. I recall it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the training itself will take place via cohorts over the course of the next 3 years. Well, starting this April. And then we also have an evaluation component to it that we're doing with the University of Pittsburgh. So, but that's, again, it's an evaluation of that one particular intervention. I think one thing we can lift up or recommend going forward, and this may be jumping ahead of us, but that at any point we look at this countywide data, however way we set this thing up, that any interventions we would want to see the county invest in, that they must dedicate some evaluation dollars to it. So that way we're always in this practice of evaluating whether or not the the program practice, whatever the case may be, as implemented, did it make any impact or changes here locally?
And that youth program, and I see y'all here, that youth program also does its own annual evaluation. That's what I thought. Okay. Chris and then Peter.
Yeah, so first of all, I just think that last bit is very important, Patrice, that you mentioned, right? I think it's easy to forget because we spend so much time thinking about the lack of incoming data from so many agencies that we're also supposed to be getting data from interventions or alternatives that are currently operating, so as to be able to offer some level of analysis and review there as well, and that's just as important. And so I think potentially the request that the way you just put all of that, right, to say that there has to be investment if we're going to, onboard a new program in some data infrastructure and staffing, perhaps, for that program to ensure that we can review and evaluate it as well is extremely important. And then beyond that, just generally, I think in terms of thinking about the best practices, and these various sorts of things that may result in or may be a part of any level of communication or training or any of that that's going out to any agencies. I think we also have to think a lot about the history each agency may have with data use agreements or MOUs or anything like that. Just because if those things have been done in the past and we can figure out, how and why that was successful, then how can we model something around that? If those things haven't been done in the past, then, from our own, sort of standpoint, and certainly with, some insight from just the organizational standpoint, for me, just working with a number of different sites in a bunch of different places, who have, done such things or at least attempted MOUs or data use agreements. What are the best practices there? What are the things that we need to, what are the bases that we need to cover to make that, a viable option for folks within the county to potentially be willing to share some information with us. And how do we get people on board with, such an agreement so as to bring some of that information in or make that a little bit less of a risky or scary or unattractive endeavor?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, my question was pretty much in line with what Chris just shared, and this may be opening up a much longer conversation, so I apologize. Just again, we're just trying to learn. So have the challenges around collecting data from the different organizations. Is it around data sharing practices, having the necessary MOUs in place? Is it around policies of confidentiality that each of the different system partners are just kind of unable to navigate given, who they are and what they're able to share and not share? Or is it more like logistical, is it like capacity? Is it a lack of staffing or data experts? Is it maybe data systems are just antiquated and they're not quite up to snuff? I'm just kind of curious, what are the dynamics that have surfaced as to why it's been challenging? I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around what the challenges have been, and then just for me for clarification, are we only looking at county criminal justice folks like probation, sheriff, DA, and public defender? Are those the only 4 organizations that we're looking at, or are there other ones that that I'm not thinking about?
Yeah, great question. I think the to your latter point, and I'm just looking at objective 2, on this specifically said county criminal justice and law enforcement agencies. I don't know if that means just county law enforcement agencies or all law enforcement agencies in the county, but I do know in the recommendations, it will, I think in the prior objective, it's looking at all law enforcement agencies, including the municipal level. So in the past, what has been shared is mostly around capacity within these various agencies. I know Sheriff's Office is now currently building up capacity, right? I think you guys are trying to hire on some staff to do some of the data stuff, and you could speak about that. But I do, and at the time when a request was made, so that was one of the progress notes here in 2022, when this body made a request directly to the district attorney's office, and at the time they said they just didn't have the capacity then. I don't think a formal request was ever made to the public defender's office, and then we within probation were able to produce some data, as well as Office of Education. So when data was even presented, it was never necessarily a standard sort of format, if you will. Most of the information was aggregate information from probation, from Office of Ed, Sheriff's Office. Once they started sending it over, it was raw information, so it wasn't analyzed. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. So like of clarity in terms of the standard for reporting. Are we looking at individual level data versus aggregate information? And if we're going to do aggregate information, what's the frequency of that? We went from, I think the original request was like monthly, then it went to quarterly. Is that going to tell us anything from time? The original intent behind that was, let's look at the information in real time and see if there's a way to intervene in a quicker turnaround. But I don't know how feasible that is from an advisory board kind of standpoint, right? That would have to be on the various agencies to kind of do that. So that was one component. And then just really practical matters such as, okay, even if in the most ideal situation, we've identified the frequency of reporting, we've identified the format and the respective data points that we wanted to see reported, and we wanted all these, and we got all these agencies, including local police departments, right, to submit this information. Who's the holder, who's analyzing, who's putting the full picture together, and yeah, how's that? And do we have resources set aside to make that actually happen? So those are some of the nuts and bolts to it. But I will at least say this body did make an effort to put the requests out there. Some responded, some did not. I think it's worth revisiting that, considering how I just think overall I think in this space, public agencies in general are moving more and more to wanting to create public-facing data transparency, so that way it answers any questions that they have at their leisure, right? It's a lot of work to pull together these reports and things of that nature, but if there was regular, on-time collection of information, it's being verified, it's being managed well, we could but we're just not at that place. Some departments are not at that place individually within their unique departments, and then to have it wholesale across everybody, that's a whole other leap, right? That's you know, we're just not there. So I think though these objectives and activities, I think they're worthy of keeping. But I also think we probably have to manage our expectations around all of the steps that are required to actually have these come to fruition. Yeah.
I don't think it's definitely not a matter of confidentiality or policy, unless we're talking about specifics, names, things like that.
Right.
When it's raw data, or at least for the sheriff's office, I can't speak for everybody. We do want to be transparent, and as obviously you know, with the quarterly reports, we do provide data, but it's a matter of capacity, ability, and software, and what data gets extracted, and who's doing it. Do we have the manpower for that? That's really what it comes down to.
There are certain laws depending on the department and depending upon, I mean, the court has some, there's penal code sections that involve disclosure of data, but typically, again, if you take out the individual identifiers in some way, you get around most of you can get around most of the legal problems, I think, without actually, I'm not giving legal advice here. But I mean, I just, because it is, those are all designed to protect individuals from having their personal information out there. So if you de-individualize it so you can't track it to a person, you get around all of that.
Any other questions? Does that answer your question, Peter? Okay. Great. Any other public comment? I think we're still like rolling these over. Just gonna keep them as is, right? I mean, yes. We're on the right track. And now that we have ORESJ getting established, I think a lot of this will, you know, just eventually roll itself out.
But if I can add one thing, I do think though we have to take this at a sort of a multi-prong approach. Yeah. That because Peter's question is raising something for me, that maybe we should just get really good at having our county agencies be able to, you know, report the sorts of information we would want to see, because some of them are already looking to invest in that capability. And so I think that's a first good place to start. We're talking, then when we get down to the police agency level, you know, we're talking about 20-something odd agencies, all of them vary in size and degrees. You know, some are contracted with the sheriff's office, and so we don't really know what those, so there's a lot of learning, I think, that would need to take place and be done as we see how each county agency is able to operate and produce that kind of information.
No, we did the ask at the mayor's conference, but I think if we have our like bare minimum, like this is what we want to see, and just have that, you know, presented to all the agencies across the board, is like, this is what we would like to collect, and can y'all do it? Do you have the capacity to do it? And can it be on a monthly, quarterly, whatever kind of basis? But yeah, instead of getting all these different things, maybe it's something on there that we don't even need, especially we're getting raw data, like maybe some things that we get that we don't even need to like take a deeper look at. But if I feel like similar to what we're doing with the sheriff, if we have specific data sets and then just ask that across the board, might be a little. But, okay. Right. Moving along. Agenda item number 6 is to discuss, finalize additional data sets for our job data subcommittee action plan. That is attachment number 3.
No, actually, that was this.
That was
attachment 2.
Okay.
I think. Oh, I'm sorry. Right.
Is that the, so that's the recommendations that we were putting together from Steve and
That's
the
right.
data subcommittee, right?
That's right.
I think we have started be attached though.
No, we don't have a list here, but this I think was the I think we wanted to wait and see the latest report.
Oh, okay.
So this was the latest one, because I know that there were other items that I'm trying to remember the timeline because it was a while ago. But I think there were other items that even the board had asked of the sheriff's office to incorporate in their final report. And I think this is what this is. And then, yeah, comparing that to some of the data points that we were starting to collect previously. Chris, do you at all happen to have it handy? You could rattle off some of the data points that we had talked about in the past.
I'm sure I can probably find that. I wouldn't say handy, but what I remember, Shayla, putting a list together, and I think I can probably dig and find it.
So I think this is new. I don't remember this being in the last quarter report where bookings by agency by race.
So that was one of the data.
Yeah.
I think we talked probably about like gender and other things, which is not in the report.
Yeah.
This is new.
Yeah.
Again, the bookings by agency by race.
Yeah.
That's something that's going to continue moving forward for each report.
Okay. So, but if the sheriff's office's report, but this is about bookings, it's not necessarily meaning it's bookings by agency. Well, I'm assuming that would be the same as arrests by agencies.
Not necessarily, because you can arrest and then cite release and they would have never been booked in our jail. So probably close in numbers, probably in percent, but not exactly.
Exactly.
The race self-identified, or is it, do we know how that is determined?
I believe it's just by the paperwork that's submitted.
Okay.
And the intake process.
Okay.
Patrice, I pulled up my notes from the last RJOB data meeting. If that would be helpful, and I jotted down what was asked for.
Yes, please. Thank you.
The group wanted to understand the age breakdown to target programming in the future. Age breakdown on those booked. And then the other data points that were brought up was age, length of stay, and non-English speaking. That's what I have in my notes.
Okay. So I found something that's a little bit different. And I'll just read this off. This was a draft. Well, there's some language in the beginning that's like we, the our job, blah, blah, blah. But it's asking for population numbers by race and ethnicity to be displayed for comparison with data showing racial demographic data of the jail population. Top 5 underlying offenses leading to bookings, traffic stops by race and ethnicity, civilian complaints, cases, and charges dismissed. And that's all on it's on a doc that I can just send around. Like, there's no need to write that down again. I can just send the email.
So they have in kind of getting at one of those data points the sheriff is reporting on prior felony. This is on page 18 of the packet, page 10 in the actual report. Prior felony by race and percentage of male population. So I'm reading this as these may be individuals who have had a prior felony, either during this quarter or I'm guessing during this quarter, that's the reporting period, that were booked in that percentage point against how many, the total ADP at that time. Am I reading that correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I think the prior felony offense by race and the percentage to that
of the total,
that total race that's in that percent, what percentage do they make up? 40% of the Hispanic population would be those that have prior felony.
They made up 30% of the ADP that were.
That's how
I'm reading it.
Or would be the age breakdown, the length of stay. In non-English speaking individuals.
That'd be the tougher data points to try to collect, to be quite honest. The stay, I thought I overheard someone in a conversation about I have to manually go through it. I don't know if it's built to extract that data and just, you know what I mean? So so many agencies booking to find out whether it came from a traffic stop or not. I don't know how easy that would be.
Did create this list, and it was supposed to be on our general.
Yeah.
That we haven't had a chance to review with the full body because we haven't met
the full body
forever.
Not met. We keep having quorum issues. So if anyone's listening, next Thursday, 1 to 4, be there or be square. Yeah, you're right about that.
I think these are already, like Chris said, they're already on the document. And I think it's already a part of the original agenda for the general body. To present it out to them.
But this is good that they have, because, as I was stating earlier, that, how difficult, I'm just guessing, the difficulty of getting some of this information per department. I mean, the sheriff's office is already providing it, based on the bookings information. And granted, that only tells a portion of the story, but maybe something to kind of start with. At least get that demographic breakdown per community.
Are there any more comments? Comments? None. Number 7 on the agenda, next step. Like a lot of this will be addressed at our general, especially the finalizing the additional data sets. We were going to take that to the full body to get buy-in and approval. We're moving that along, and then I think we're pretty much as far as like the discussion around our goals and objectives and our role as data subcommittee. But before we close out, any final remarks, comments, thoughts?
Well, I do want to ask if it's of interest to the committee, we bring back Center for Policing and Equity, just to see if they have any, we can at least inquire to see if they have any outcome information from the communities that they've worked in, and see if that's a worthy, just thinking ahead of potential interventions that they've already kind of helped communities employ. Something for us to look at.
I think so.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So our next meeting will be Thursday, March 28th from 3 to 5. Location to be determined, or will it be here?
No, I think it's here. Can you confirm, Garyana? Do we have that one here? Garyana, are you there? Let's see.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm looking it up right now. Okay. I'm almost there.
Well, in either case, it will either be here or
it is here.
It is okay.
So
it's here.
I'm not going to be able to make March 28th. So to make sure we have quorum, somebody else is going to have to be physically here, right?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm giving you months of warning.
We appreciate it. Trust me. Will you be able to be here? Yes. All right. Shannon, we you know, yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent, thank you.
Make it work.
Thanks for saying that. I know Patrice and Garyana are like, if she asks me one more time if we have quorum.
No, I get it, because you know we have to make the drive. You know, doing it by Zoom spoiled
so much. It
really did. And now we have to, you know, fetch taxis and ride shares to get
until there's some sort of legislative change.
Before it.
Yeah.
With that being said, again, our next meeting, March 28th, 3 to 5 will be here, and
all right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Speaking of